Hello and welcome to another podcast of Jurors in Disguise. My name is Mary Rose Peterson and I own Covert Ops Jury Investigations. What do we do? I'm glad you asked. We investigate the jury to find the one or more jurors who lied during jury selection so they would be chosen and could then ensure that our clients were convicted. In this podcast, I'm going to be talking about our client, Anthony Tyrone Simmons. His case is out of Jackson County, Florida. He went to trial the end of October 2023. Shortly after that, his wife Febie called and asked us for help. The voir dire had not yet been ordered to be transcribed, so I got a copy of the video of the proceedings so that I could hear what questions the prospective jurors were asked when they were being interviewed for the jury and what answers they gave. Why that's important is because as we're investigating them, we needed to be able to compare what they said during the voir dire and who they said they were with who they really were live and in person. When we did that, I will say we were able to find 3 of the 6 panel jury who had lied during jury selection, lied about material elements of the case that had they been honest, had they spoken up and been forthcoming, the defense attorney would have struck them. I'm always interested in the voir dire because it sets up the case. That's the first thing I read when we get a new case is the voir dire. In this case, I watched it and I wrote down the things that I thought were important to know and important to point out going forward. So I'm going to read this little bit that Judge Ana Garcia said to the prospective jurors. It gives you a little insight as to what her mindset was during jury selection. She said, "Ladies and gentlemen, the process we're about to begin is called voir dire. That means to tell the truth. It's a unique opportunity between the potential jurors and the attorneys in this case. That's the only time we have that opportunity to communicate back and forth like that with each other. It is your opportunity to completely and truthfully answer the questions posed to you by the attorneys. The questions posed are not meant to pry, but to see if you would be a proper candidate to serve on a jury such as this. In sum, we are looking for people that can fairly and truthfully consider the evidence in this case, leaving aside any personal feelings and bias you may have. Keep in mind, Anthony was falsely accused and wrongfully convicted of aggravated battery with a firearm. The issue I have with jury selections is that it appears these jurors think that it's their decision whether or not they want to be on the jury. They leave out very important pieces of information as if to say to the court and the state and the defense and the defendant, you don't need to know that about me. So I'm just not going to say it. Now, to me, that indicates bias. If you lie about things that are material to the case, then you must be biased because otherwise you would simply tell the truth. The problem with that mindset is that it's not up to you as a prospective juror. That's why you are a prospective juror. It is up to the judge and ultimately the state and the defense and the defendant to choose who they think would be a fair and impartial juror. Even if you say you can be fair and impartial, but then you turn around and lie, well, guess what? Your credibility is 0. So that's why it's important to me to read the voir dire and then compare to what we find about the jurors. Another thing I thought was interesting is that Judge Garcia asked the clerk to please re-administer the oath to the prospective jurors, which the clerk did. She said, please raise your right hand, and then gave them the standard, you promise to be swear and affirm that you'll be forthcoming and honest and answering the questions, blah, blah, blah. Re-administer, which means they'd already taken an oath earlier. Now they were taking it a second time, promising, swearing under God to tell the truth, and then lied. 3 of them, at least. The other thing that I found interesting about the voir dire is that the assistant state attorney, Lawrence Gill, said this to the veneer. This morning, we'll talk a little bit about aggravated battery, but I want to start out with what is the purpose of jury selection. We've talked a little bit about that so far, and I want to go into more depth on that and why jury selection is so important. The purpose of jury selection is to get the best jury for this case. So this is an opportunity where we get to talk to you, and I welcome you to participate in as much as possible in the jury selection. There are no right or wrong answers to any of the questions, okay? If I do ask a question that makes you feel uncomfortable, please let me know. We might be able to discuss that with the judge and the attorneys at sidebar, okay? So why is jury selection so important? There are a few ways you can serve this great country. The easiest way to just get out and vote. The greatest way is to serve in the military. Doing what you're doing right now, if you're selected as a juror, falls somewhere in between. So if you're selected, you're going to hold me and the other state attorney accountable, make sure we meet our burden of proof beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt. You're going to afford Mr. Simmons here his due process rights, his absolute right to go to trial, and he gets a fair trial. Not only that Mr. Simmons gets a fair trial, but so does the state of Florida. You are going to take an oath to follow and see that our laws are followed and ultimately that justice is done in this case. I want to thank you for your time and attention here. I know it's time out of your schedule. You're going to find out if you keep watching that, oh, the state of Florida got a fair trial, all right, because they got a win. However, our client, Anthony Tyrone Simmons, did not get a fair trial by an impartial jury. And when the court was presented with that, suspicious? I think so. Well, we're going to start with the first person that we found juror misconduct on. Turned out she was a foreperson, Yolanda Rochelle Nellens Tillmans Hearns. Now that gives you a little insight as to how many times she was married. Interestingly, what we found out about her son's father, his last name is Cowart. They were not ever married. But Attorney Gill had asked the veneer, have you yourself or a close friend or family member been accused of a crime? Foreperson Hearns lied. She failed to disclose that in 1997, she was arrested and charged twice with grand theft, which were later pled down to 2 counts of obtaining property in return for a worthless check. Now, if that's all we found, and you were on trial basically for your life, because our client got a 30-year sentence, which means he'll either die in prison or get out very, very old. If you were charged with aggravated battery with a firearm, would you want someone on your jury who did not disclose crimes of dishonesty? I don't think so. But that's not all. She also failed to disclose that her son's father, Lee Cowart, had criminal charges in another county from 1989 until 2015, which include battery, resisting and obstructing of law enforcement officers, trespassing, drug and alcohol charges, and criminal traffic charges. He had also been in prison from March of 98 to October of 99 on resisting an officer and cocaine charges. Now, I realize that this case has nothing to do with drugs or resisting officers. But again, would you want a juror on your jury who lied about her son's father being in prison, having gone through the system? I don't think so. She didn't stop there. She also failed to disclose that her son, Leandre Cowart, was arrested on January 17th, 2013, and charged with aggravated domestic assault. It's stacking up against her. Her stepdaughter, Shamika Hearns, was arrested in May of 2017 and charged with petty theft, another crime of dishonesty. And her friend, Miss Pride, was arrested in April of 91 and charged with retail theft. Ultimately convicted. Again, crimes of dishonesty. We also found that there were 2 cases on the clerk of court's docket, and we inquired further. They mentioned Yolanda Rochelle Nellens, which is one of her former names. This case, we got some information back from the clerk, and they said, quote, be advised that Yolanda Rochelle Nellens is a listed party as follows to this case. Quote, witness for the prosecution. Uh-huh. So you were a witness for the state on that case. We looked up and found another case where she went shopping with a friend of hers, and her friend came out wearing several articles of clothing that she did not pay for. They charged her friend with retail theft, and four-person Hearns was a witness for the state. Again, I find that highly suspicious. So you were a witness for the state in two cases, which means, which tells me, you knew exactly what you were doing when you withheld these other charges. Were you told to do that? No. There's her baby daddy in prison. Didn't tell him about that. There she is. Look, baby daddy. And here is her signature on Anthony's verdict form. Is this the kind of person that you want serving on your jury? I don't think so. In fact, I know so. No, and no. I was a four-person once. Four persons have a lot of influence over the other jurors, and she didn't have to work very hard because there were two more who lied to get on the jury. The next one is juror Kimberly Marie Poland Cook Baxley, another one married multiple times. When State Attorney Lawrence Gill asked them, have you yourself or a close friend or family member been accused of a crime? Juror Baxley was honest. She said, my husband. Now that's half the truth. Her husband was. We looked up, the cases were in Georgia. The first case was in 2008. He was charged and convicted of child molestation. In 2016, he was charged and convicted of sexual battery against a child less than 16 years old. He served time in prison. He got out on probation and then violated his probation. Now, why that's important is not only, I get it. This is not a sex crime. Anthony was not charged with a sex offense. So you could say, well, she's just embarrassed. Well, all right, I'll give her that. But the problem we have with it is that her daughter, Emily Cook, was the victim in those cases. Emily Cook was also in 2022 arrested and charged with battery domestic violence and domestic violence assault. She didn't speak up about those cases. She was also charged in Virginia with assault and battery. So her daughter has assault and battery charges and domestic violence charges, which is exactly what Anthony was falsely accused of, a domestic violence case. Is that the kind of juror that you'd want on your jury with your life in their hands? I don't think so. Here's her baby daddy. And here's her pose with her daughter, Emily. So if interviewed, which they weren't interviewed, if she was, she would be hard pressed to say she didn't know about that. Don't you think? Oh, she knew, in my opinion. Those were those two jurors. So you see, already you've got two jurors out of six who should not have been on Anthony's jury. But they lied and snuck their way right into that deliberation room. Attorney Gill even went row by row asking if you yourself, a close friend or family member, have ever been accused of a crime, victim of a crime, row by row. They had the whole voir dire to speak up about this and say, oh, I was thinking about it and I remember now. No, not a word. Then we have the third juror, Dana Renee Martin Watford. He asked again, friends, family member, been accused of a crime. She said nothing. We found in February 2012 her sister, Stacy Ann Martin Steingrubby, was charged with endangering the welfare of a child in Missouri's court. On December 4th, 2015, her sister's son, Jason Stein Grubby, was arrested and charged with grand theft in Hillsborough County. Again, a charge, crime of dishonesty. Here's a juror with her sister. Be hard pressed to say she didn't know about those cases. This was actually posted in 2014, and she commented and said it was taken in 2009. So clearly these two were close. Did she speak up about any of that? No. Is that the kind of juror that you want on your jury? Regardless of what you're charged with, would you want her on your jury? I didn't think so. In fact, I know so. So I wrote a report in November 2023. The state answered it, poo-pooed all over my report, our findings. So I wrote another report, April 16th, 2024. At this point, I had the transcript of the voir dire. And I will just read this little bit. This will give you an idea of what State Attorney Lawrence Gill tried to argue when he asked the judge to deny the motion for the juror misconduct. I said, to begin, I will address the statements that were made by Assistant State Attorney Lawrence Gill in his memorandum that pertained to me and my company. On page 2, Anthony Gill states, quote, the information needed to obtain the background check into the prospective jurors was made available to the defendant and the covert ops jury investigation team well in advance of the October 23, 2023 jury selection. Okay, the problem with that is that Febie did not call me until October 30th, 7 days after trial. So how was I supposed to know about these jurors and have access to information when I didn't even know about the case? Okay, that was a lie. Put in an official document. That was not true, Attorney Gill. He knew that. On page 3, Attorney Gill again states, the defense has failed to establish how the delay of the jury selection audio-video has caused hardship when they had access to obtain juror background information through the covert ops jury investigation team well in advance of October 23, 2023. Another lie. He knew. In my report, I said we weren't contacted until the 30th. Unbelievable. Next, on page 5, Attorney Gill states the exhibits contained in the report on which the defendant's appeal relies on are inadmissible, non-sworn, unverified evidence, and therefore do not establish any juror concealment or misconduct. This is not accurate, folks. Well, okay, let me ask you, based on what I just told you, do you think that these jurors lied? Would it be your opinion that they weren't truthful intentionally and that they concealed a bias against Anthony? And maybe that's how he got convicted? I'll just give you a little spoiler alert. Febie's going to come on and talk about the case, and you're going to learn there was no case. There was no case. The state totally made it up. And the only person that was supposedly injured in this was his nephew, and Anthony's nephew, and he wasn't even injured. So again, not accurate. With that said, now we're going to talk to Febie and get some really good insight into what happened. What led up to that? How did this case ever get to trial? You will be very interested to learn what she has to say. So help me welcome Anthony's wife, Febie Simmons.
Can you hear me?
Hey,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm okay.
Yep. That's your thing. I love it.
Know that they can't understand how it transpired the way that it did. I think that's the most hurtful part. the fact of how you worked so hard on the investigation and it was just kind of like threw up in the air and blew to the north, south, east, and west. Nobody took it into consideration. That's the most frustrating part for them because everybody looked and saw the evidence that was found by um your company. And when we looked at the evidence and all of us saw the exact same thing, we like, there's no way a judge can deny this. And when the judge denied it, it was like frustration just really took over everybody.
Right. Well, it's a gut punch, and when you get this on a piece of paper with no explanation, and it's like, wait a minute, when you read what the judge said to the prospective jurors and compelling them to speak up and be honest and be truthful, and Judge Garcia did a beautiful job, putting the fear of God in them to tell the truth. And then we get in front of the court and they go, what is that? Yeah. It's equally frustrating for us. You had 6 jurors, and 3 out of the 6, including the foreperson, lied about things or withheld information that would have most certainly gotten them struck. And you even had your trial attorney say, I would have struck them. I would have exercised a strike. I would never have let them on the jury had they said that, you know.
Right.
So I felt like your trial attorney, public defender Elizabeth Simpson. I know public defenders get a bum rap. They are overwhelmed. I've been told that they will have sometimes 300 cases versus a state attorney who will have 50 to 75. Well, that's barely
Right.
plea manageable. It's all you can do just to get them to talk plea deal, let alone go to trial. There's no time for that. So when they do, and when Elizabeth put in so much work into this, even afterwards, was so cooperative with us, and we've talked so many times about just being hopeful and the next step, and a lot of good information here, and then you know
The Miss Kathy Lane direct appeal was affirmed by the appellate court. She has now put forth a motion for reconsideration because she said she believed there's bias in there. So she has already filed that paperwork. I'm not sure how far she is able to go with his case. So I know my husband has with her and asked her to do some other things, but he's waiting on her response back to say whether she can or she can't. Just gonna say if she can, that's good. If she can't, we are now in the prospect of finding another attorney.
Yeah, and more money to hire another attorney. Oh, I will say that out of all the cases where public defenders have been involved, I have really been impressed with the 2 on your case that have stepped in and really fought for you, which is, I'm not saying it's rare because they do, but most of the time, once you're convicted, they're off the case and on to something else. And so it's, and appeals are difficult to win, but not impossible. We went back. I told you this. We went back on the direct appeal. It went back to the court, and the judge had to decide something. He just said, well, denied, but hey, you don't know what God's going to bless. So you don't know when you get back in court, which is the goal always, get your foot back in the door, get back in the house. And you just don't know what God's going to use. But as I've told you from the beginning, and I still believe that, Phoebe, Anthony is coming home. It's just a matter of when and how. And I said that for 4 years, 2 months, and 13 days about my husband. And people thought I was crazy. Said, doesn't he have a life sentence? I said, he sure does, but that's just 4 letters on a piece of paper. To me, it means nothing. And it means nothing to God. And as a believer, yes, Anthony believed that. The hard part, that's where they live and work and breathe and eat, sleep, and we don't. We're learning it the hard way, as we go. All of these, I just get a kick out of even the jury selection. Why don't you just call it jury selection? Why do you have to give it some fancy French word, which ironically means to speak the truth, but still, they just say all these things of PCA'd and all procurum affirmed and all these crazy words and terms that you think, I don't even know what that means, Well, we affirm the lower court. Well, what does that mean? You affirm the lower court. What's the lower court? Well, the trial court. But why don't you just say trial court? What I mean? It's like, and
I had to look it up and see what it meant.
yeah. Oh, I spent a lot of time Googling and initially trying to find a direct appeal. Okay, what's that? What's a merit brief? What's an Anders brief? What does that mean? And how long is this going to take? And all those things. And I always get a kick out of every once in a while some smarty pants who makes me smile when I read the voir dire will the transcript will say to the court, well, if he's not guilty yet, if he's innocent till proven guilty, why has he been arrested? Why is he wearing a jail jumpsuit? Why is he in handcuffs? Well, exactly.
Right.
If you're called the defendant and your attorney is the defense attorney, but yet they tell you don't have to defend yourself. Really? Well, then if I'm innocent, why am I called a defendant?
That's true.
The whole process is it's there to fail you, as you know, but we know God ultimately is in charge. So
Right.
state of Florida.
That's the truth. That's the truth. I am disappointed though with the court system when it does come to the jurors because if I was sitting on the opposite side in the shoes that my husband was sitting in, I would want that individual to be honest. Even if I out you to stay on there with your honesty, it's a self-conscious choice then because I can maybe relate to what you may have been through. But if you're not honest about it, I think you've never been through anything. So therefore you're not going to be biased one way or the other. But when I find out that you sit there and blatantly lied about it
Right.
and on different things, it's I don't even know the word to put it in, but that right there, the court then should step in and say, "Hey, I'm sorry, we're gonna have this is a mistrial. We're gonna have to get you a new set of jurors." And the court needs to do better with checking the jurors' background.
Right. Well, and I've said this often on podcasts. That's been the biggest shock to me because when I started this company, I thought that all of this pre-talk, this preamble, as they call it, speaking to the prospective jurors, telling them to tell the truths, taking oaths, all these things, that meant something, that in fact, I'm going to read this real quick. This is just the very first thing that Judge Garcia said to the prospective jurors, and this sets it up. She said, "Good morning again, guys. My name is Ana Garcia. I'm one of the 13th Circuit judges here in the 14th Judicial Circuit. I welcome you to our courtroom. Your jury service is so important to ensure that we are able to guarantee everybody their constitutional right to a trial by jury. So thank you. In order to have a fair and lawful trial, there are rules that all jurors must follow. The jurors must decide the case only on the evidence presented in the courtroom." And then the one thing I thought was fun, I, of course, had two reports, but this one in the very first report, she said, um, any juror who violates these restrictions jeopardizes the fairness of these proceedings, and a mistrial could result that would require the entire trial proceeding to start over. A mistrial is a tremendous expense and an inconvenience to the parties, the court, and the taxpayers. If any party violates these rules, you may be held in contempt of court and face sanctions such as serving time in jail, paying a fine, or both. Yay! But then our attorneys show the court where these people came in there 2 weeks ago and lied to your face. Judge Garcia
Yes.
lied to you and laughed about it. And you did nothing. So what was that speech? What was it? Because you didn't mean it. You couldn't have meant it. Because if you meant it, then those 3 jurors would have been dragged into that courtroom and they would have been held in contempt and they would have had to answer for their crimes. And they didn't have an answer. And you're right. It would have been a mistrial and Anthony would be home and you would not be talking to me, which I'd be okay with because we'd be talking about other things. It,
Right.
that's the hardest part for me about what I do is that time after time, 117 cases, time after time after time, we show the courts and the courts go, really? So that those words, those were not truthful words because if those were truthful, then you would have dragged those jurors in there and you would have held. I mean, your trial had just happened the week before. It wasn't like it was 20 years later. It was fresh on everyone's minds. And no, denied. Um, tell us what you're comfortable with explaining what happened. What led up to this, because I think it's important, and you don't have to give a lot of details, but it's important for people to know what led up to this, to Anthony being in trial. What happened?
His nephew, um, and I'm trying to say it nicely. His nephew as was upset and angry with my husband because my husband told him about stealing money from his grandmother, which is my husband's mother.
Okay.
Prior to the my husband being arrested, this was like months and months before that. They had got into an argument about that and how he was mistreating his mom by raising his son, which he's had his son since the young man was 7 years old. Next week, on matter of fact, in a day, he'll be 17.
Wow.
So that issue, he was angry with my husband. Um, we don't know where he actually was injured at. It Nobody can really determine that factor. But when he was asked by the officers, he kept repeating the statement. He didn't know. He didn't know. It was an accident. Never could give any direct information as to it. When he got in the ambulance behind closed doors and an officer walked in with him, came in later, should I say, the officer made the statement, "Oh, he's gonna tell me who done it," and he gave my husband's name. So that threw my husband to be charged with aggravated battery with a weapon. They came in, they came down here to my house, which we live within feet of each other from my
I
mother-in-law's house.
remember that. Yeah.
And they asked me about it, and I'm looking at them like I'm crazy because I'm like, "Say what?
Yeah. What are you talking about? Yeah.
For real?" They asked, could they search the house. I said, "You're more than welcome to look." They came in, no weapons other than the ones that I own, and I am a licensed carrier.
Right.
The courts are still holding them.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, they're still holding my guns almost 3 years later. So with that being said, they arrested my husband a few weeks later. I want to say it was. I can't remember exactly how long, but uh, my husband had went the day that we got into the argument. He left and went to our granddaughter's house, which live in Georgia. We both have a key to her house, and we always popping up on her. So I know when he's angry, he'll go up there. When I get angry, I'll go up there.
That's nice.
So, and that's us to have peace between one another, cause it takes us 5 hours to drive there. So by the time we get there, we're tired, we're calm down, and it me for another day of this that's life.
That's excellent marital advice right there.
So that's what I do.
Yeah.
And that, like I say, that day we got into an argument. Can't even remember what the argument was about now, but he ended up going up there to my our granddaughter house, and like I say, late that night, that evening, that's when he got accused of uh shooting his nephew in the leg. And I'm to this day, I'm still kind of confused on that. I'm kind of like, what in the world?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I'm and I try not to even think about it.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to keep thinking about it. Didn't you? I know there was a lot of discussion at trial about and even after trial about the video cameras, the Ring doorbell or something about the cameras that you had a camera outside.
Yes, I had cameras outside. They took my ladder and took my cameras off. I'm sorry, my grandbabies just walked in.
That's
But
okay. How old your
took my uh 4.
Oh,
It's several front room at this point in time, 5-year-old, 6-year-old,
yeah.
4-year-old.
Yeah,
And
I hear you.
it was
Ours are from 11 months to 12. So yeah, I have to think about it. And then they're always having birthdays. So I have to think, okay, are they 11 or are they 12 now? Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Um, they I was sitting on the porch, the investigator was talking to me, um, she said, "We're taking your cameras." No, the officer had got the ladder and was going up the ladder to get my cameras, and I looked at her and I says, "Y'all are taking my security?" "Yes, we are taking those." And I'm like,
Wow.
"Why are you taking my security?"
Yeah.
And she what was the statement she made? "Oh, it may be evidence on it." And I'm like, "They don't even work, first of all. They're just there to deter people from
Right.
coming on the property,
Right.
doing don't have
Right.
their business."
Right.
But they took my cameras. Um, like I say, they took my guns that had nothing to do with this.
Mhm.
They were in my dresser drawer on my side of the bed. The officer said because there was a pair of boots on that side of the bed, that was the side that my husband slept on. And I just started laughing because he didn't realize I wear boots because that's the kind of work me and my husband would do around. And I didn't like working in tennis shoes.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
that never I'm sorry, somebody was
That's
on
okay.
the phone.
That's
There was things I feel like they done inappropriate in this case that should have been brought forth,
Mhm.
but none of us ever mentioned.
Mm. But what was the state's motive? What motive did they give? Just an argument?
They couldn't even give one.
Yeah.
They couldn't even give a reason why would he shoot him for no reason.
Yeah. So Anthony was convicted based on no evidence and no real injury and no explanation of a crime either way and no proof of anything.
Mm, right. Um, they stated that my husband shot him with a shotgun at close range
Mhm.
and he still has his leg intact.
Well, that's it. I don't know much about guns, but wouldn't
If
that have
you
kind of blown your leg off? I mean, you would have been injured.
at close range, taking it slap off.
Yeah. Yeah.
There would have been no need to put back there. But they also stated in the paperwork there was an entrance wound and an exit wound. Shotguns don't make an entrance wound and an exit wound.
No, no, that much I do know. Right, that Anthony was convicted, and his release date is August 19th of 2048. Based on nothing. He got 25 years, aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, and no proof of anything. The goal is, of course, we know the state likes to win, and they will lie and cheat to do it.
Right.
They will just make stuff up, and
Yes, that's true.
I'm just curious, how much would you guesstimate that your family has spent from the time, just trying to defend Anthony?
Um, over $75,000.
Yeah. And you're not even done yet. Yeah.
No, because now it costs more for another attorney,
Right.
and we don't even know what to expect on that end.
When I first talked to you, you were in shock naturally because you couldn't understand not only how did it get to this with nothing and, no weapon, no testimony that was the least bit credible, and not even in the county. It's it's like he wasn't even home. So how did this happen? And I believe I probably told you what I tell everybody is that it has nothing to do with the case, obviously, because it would have been a mistrial or a not guilty. It's about the jury. And that I was confident, as I always am going into investigations, that we will find something because it's the jury's fault. They went in the room and they came back and said guilty. That's why Anthony's in prison. And the fact that it hasn't been argued well is why he's, in my opinion, still there. But, we know now, looking back, after finding what we did about these jurors, you know what happened now.
Yes,
All the questions are answered, but it still circles back to, but why is he still there? You know,
right.
why is he still in prison? He should be home.
That's true.
He should not still be there, certainly. But the courts don't like to admit mistakes. And like I said, I
That's true.
really thought that having a common enemy be the juror who lied and mucked it up for the state and the defense, I thought that that would be the scapegoat in a sense. That the courts coming back into court, we didn't say that anybody made a mistake. We didn't say that it's the fault of your attorney or the prosecutor or the judge or the bailiff or the court reporter or anybody. We said no. These three women came into court and lied to everyone, and I always expect the judges to be horrified and angry. And I expect the judges to say, you know what? You're right. It's nobody's fault because you can't anticipate somebody like you said. You sit there and you're not being truthful. Well, you have to assume that they're going to be truthful because they took an oath and they said they would be truthful. And nobody expects them to then lie except us,
Right.
you know.
That
But it floors me every time when the courts say, so the whole big speech meant nothing. You really don't care about constitutional rights. You care about winning, and you want.
that's it.
And I still am convinced that some state attorneys' offices put people on juries to ensure verdicts or them, because I don't have any other explanation. Why would these three women come into court and lie about important things, material to their jury service? And then why would the court refuse to have a juror interview?
I agree.
You can
That's the
blame it. It's untimely. No, it wasn't untimely. It was not untimely. It was not irrelevant. It was material and it mattered.
That's right. That was the biggest blow for me because I read the paperwork. I saw the documentation that you found on the jurors, and I'm like you. I'm confused as to how you could not look at that juror and say, "How dare you lie to this court?"
That's right. Well, and
You have to look now and question behind their lie.
right. Well, a life is at stake here, and you want to. What I don't understand is why you would do that. I understand the whole vigilante justice. You think you're being a hero. Maybe you were put on the jury to ensure a guilty verdict. I don't know. I don't have an explanation as to why these three women lied. But what I'm surprised about every time is the judges that refuse to have a hearing, let alone a juror interview. And it's like, but they came in and lied to your face. Why wouldn't you want to talk to them? I want to talk to them. I would love to call these jurors up and go, why? Why did you destroy this family over, because you and I talked about, if you just sat at trial and you listened truthfully and clearly and with your mind in the game as to what the state presented, you could fish out all the lies and all the innuendos and all the there you've gotten, and at the end you would say, you don't have a case. You don't have a case. You did not
Right.
to your case. You don't have a case. There was no case here.
That's
That's what a common sense person would have said. So why did these 3 jurors,
true.
even though they lied to get on the jury, why did they go in that deliberation room and not say, "Wait a minute, time out." So we have no weapon, we have no motive, we have no injury, and nothing that the state said made any sense. Shotgun and no injury at point blank range, none of that makes any sense. And my purview and our attorney's purview is, look, if you didn't tell the truth, then you were actually biased. That's the proof. The courts want you to prove bias. I can prove bias because you were asked to tell the truth and you lied.
Right.
So if you weren't biased, you would have simply told the truth. Mm.
That's right.
Was there anything else about the case or the process that you'd like people to know?
Um, I would tell anybody that is facing a serious charge and has to go to court. I know it might not seem like it at this point and what we've dealt with, but I would always suggest that the jurors be investigated because the courts are not going to do it.
No.
For your loved one to get a fair trial, I think that needs to be laid out on the table so that they will know that the individual sitting up there making a decision whether they're being locked up or they're being set free is by an individual that has not lied to the court.
Right. No, that's good advice. It's very good advice. Oh boy, Phoebe. Um, what has this done to Anthony? I know you visit and talk daily. What has this done to him?
Um,
Yeah, they put it on.
I don't think my husband, even when he comes out, he'll ever be the same person. This he's been put in a situation where he's not living. He's alive, but he's not living.
Yeah.
When you're living, you're able to communicate freely with the people that you care about or your job or whatever you may be doing in life. But when you're just alive, you're at a standstill sometimes.
Yeah.
And right now he's alive and he's at a standstill. And he does not know which way his life is going to go. Whether he's going to ever come home to his family or whether he's going to die in prison behind 3 people that lied.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's the most hurtful part for him, for me, and all of his family.
Yeah. Well, you had family that lied and started this whole downward spiral and
Yep.
just and lie after lie and state attorneys that put liars on the stand knowing they wasn't being truthful. That was no gunshot wound.
Yep, and, um, mm, with even with that being said, I can't comprehend either how you put the his nephew on the stand
Mhm.
that was on probation, still is on probation, has been incarcerated more times than I got fingers, and has been caught in more lies than I got fingers, hands, and toes. But you could take his testimony as credible. It's, and I don't have any animosity or hate towards him, but I'm being truthful about it. There's no possible way that his statement on anything could be counted credible.
Mm. Mm. How do you hold on to hope?
I pray a lot. I serve a God that sits well. I serve a true and living God. And I know that at some point in time, as we have stated time and time again, my husband's coming home.
Yes. Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
That's my faith. That's my belief. And no one can tell me any different unless God himself came and told me he's not coming home.
Yeah. And I don't believe he's going to do that. I don't know. I can't speak for God, but God is a God of justice. And,
Yes,
liars just don't know. Just know. I know he's coming home. He's coming home.
I do.
Period. Sooner versus later, of course. I know what it means to have your husband in prison.
Yes.
I know what it means to have him home. And Phoebe, we don't talk every day, but I will tell you, I pray constantly that Anthony comes home to you because I know what I to be out here without him. And there are no words. There just aren't words. And to know, like you said, that started with a lie and that it just has continued lie after lie after lie. When our courts say they're all about justice, they say they're about truth. They take oaths and swear on the Bible, in front of God and everybody to be honest, and then they're not. And then
That's true.
and then the courts think, what, you're honest enough? What's that like being kind of pregnant? I don't understand.
No,
How can you deny that he didn't get a fair trial? It's not okay that, well, you won, so therefore it doesn't matter. No, it matters. This man is languishing
it does.
and you're out here alone and you should be together. You should be together. So we continue to pray that for you. And that's why I wanted to do this podcast and just expose the lies and the pull back the curtain and say, this is what really is going on. And this is what went on in your case. And it's wrong.
Yeah.
Every level. It's just wrong. There is no justice being served. And I do pray that the Ms. Lane's motion, which I'm sure is well done, because seems like a fighter and she seems very vested in your case and your family. Um,
Yes.
what I've read is very positive, and the fact that she's communicating with you, and that's what I meant to say earlier too, that it's hard to find an attorney that will talk to you in between decisions.
Yes.
We have two that we work
I
with.
mean, she does always, even if I don't talk to her or she doesn't talk to me, she does keep my husband informed as to what she has done and where this case is at.
And that's so
That's
rare.
is the most comforting.
And
Yeah.
I'm sorry for what your family's been through. You shouldn't have been put in this situation. You shouldn't have been forced to spend almost $100,000 on a case where there was no case. Why? Just so somebody can win and pad their record so they can go on to be a judge. And that's most judges are former state attorneys. So, I hope that in exposing this, that people start to become as outraged as you and I are at our system and how broken it is, and that it just destroys families. For what?
It does.
For power, for fame, for what no, that's not okay. That's not
True.
okay. Is there anything else that you would like people to know?
They prayed up.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was gonna say. How can we help your family? Pray, 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 pray. I love your t-shirt. That's very,
Thank you.
very appropriate. I'm sure it was intentionally chosen for tonight. Yeah. That's just,
Pray to keep.
yep. Stay prayerful and just encourage Anthony that he has not been forgotten, and that we haven't forgotten him. The courts just love to throw people away, but we know that God will redeem this. I know that
That's true.
he will.
That's true.
Thank you for the time. I'm so grateful and I'm thankful for your friendship and looking so forward to welcoming Anthony home. And we just pray that, like I said, that it's sooner versus later. We pray for this appeal that's ongoing. And in Jesus' name, we pray Anthony home.
Amen. Very much so.
Amen. Well, thank you, Phoebe. Thanks for the time. I know this is hard going back into it, but it's important for people to know what happened and what they need to be prepared to do. Like you said, if you are accused falsely, then you need to be ready. That's good
That's
advice.
true.
Well, keep me posted.
I will.
We love you guys, and we'll keep praying Anthony home. Thank you for watching another podcast of Jurors in Disguise. Please be sure to like and subscribe. But more importantly, if you know someone who needs our help, please reach out. You will find our contact information at the end of the podcast. Remember, until next time, the courtrooms may be silent, but we won't be. We will speak up, we will speak out, and we will always speak the truth. Thank you and God bless.